Welcome to That's Good Sports. I am Brandon. The Broncos have fired head coach Vic Fangio, and more importantly, Pat Shurmur, Perna. Today I'll break down the firings, what it means for the Denver Broncos, and who they may be considering to interview for Vic's replacement. At the moment, we don't know how competitive the head coaching market will even be in the NFL. There are coaches like David Culley down in Houston who could be fired. Question marks in Vegas, Seattle, and an enticing spot in Chicago. And while Denver used to be a top destination, I'm not so sure anymore. Regardless, there will be plenty to discuss all offseason. The Broncos need to move fast, and as a tribute for Vic Fangio, who I liked, I give you one last
meatball.
That's good sports. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you don't, I will own your soul in hell. Today's episode is sponsored by D's Nuts. Seriously, my chestnuts are brought to you by manscaped.com/goodsports. Link below. Now, Christmas may be over. And if you didn't get Manscaped, maybe treat yourself with a nice little package for your regularly sized package with the Performance Package from Manscaped. If you did see Mommy kissing Santa Claus, it's because he didn't let his undercarriage look like his frothy face. Gift it for yourself because the Performance Package has everything you need for you to slay your balls. The Lawnmower 4.0, a waterproof cordless trimmer with skin-safe technology to reduce pube trimming, nicks, and cuts, plus the Weed Whacker to power through nasty nose hairs, and the Crop Preserver and Crop Reviver to keep your balls fresh and smelling amazing. So if you want to start the year off with a cleanly shaven, aroma-pleasing pube area, the Performance Package is the only way to do it to make sure your man basement is glowing oh so bright. Manscaped.com/goodsports for 20% off, plus free international shipping and 2 free gifts. Manscaped. All right, after a lot of speculation, General Manager George Paton, not John Elway, guys, it's George Paton, informed Vic Fangio that he is no longer the head coach of the Denver Broncos. After succeeding Vance Joseph in 2019, Fangio was the team's head coach for 3 seasons, compiling a total record of 19-30 and 0 playoff appearances. Within the division, Vic put together a record of 5-13, which is a recipe to alienate your own fans. And unless you're Johnny Bolin,
George Paton sucks fucking flamingo balls through a fucking hose.
I think that most in Broncos country trust George Paton to navigate this head coaching hire appropriately. Whatever he does, my number one preference is to hire a head coach who doesn't stand on the sidelines with his hands under his armpits for 3 hours. I also want him to hire a head coach who is pro touchdowns. To me, this was probably not the easiest decision. Fangio brought a lot to the table as a head coach, mostly on the defensive side of the ball, and of course, meatballs. Okay, maybe only to the defensive side of the ball. That was the problem. The Broncos defense finished 3rd in scoring this year, and the team as a whole ended up with a positive point differential despite a disappointing 7-10 record after starting the year 3-0. I think the biggest takeaway, at least for me, is that it's really hard to succeed as an NFL head coach if you don't have a franchise-type QB. Especially if, as a head coach, your skills lie almost exclusively on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not even sure Fangio knew who started on offense from week to week. Now, I think there are exceptions, like the Sean McVays out there okay, maybe just Sean McVay. He made Jared Goff a Super Bowl QB. Losing Super Bowl QB, but if you look at some of the other hot coaches right now, Zach Taylor, Matt LaFleur, hell, even Brandon Staley, they have great quarterbacks to work with. Fangio came in and worked with Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, Jeff Driscoll, Brett Rippon, Kendall Hinton, and Teddy Bridgewater. None of those are, as Vic might say, top shelf.
Well, I mean, those other 3 teams have top shelf quarterbacks. okay, which is obvious to everybody.
Basically, a bunch of QBs just above the Wells level of liquor. Far from the top shelf. Outside of QB, the big problem with Fangio is that he's never been a good game manager. He can scheme up a defense, but his clock management and adjustments have not been up to par. The Broncos would have finished 10-7, not 7-10, if they flipped the result of every one-score game in 2021. That said, what he was able to get out of a defense that lost every starter at the linebacker position this season is pretty incredible. And that's both outside and inside linebacker. Vic Fangio's tragic flaw was participating in the signing of Pat Shurmur as offensive coordinator. I do take some pleasure in knowing that the Broncos will have a new offensive coordinator this next season. Pat Shurmur has been let go as well, ending 2 years of torture for Broncos fans. This man was essentially Ramsay Bolton from Game of Thrones, treating the Broncos offense like Theon Greyjoy, cutting off their dicks every week with atrocious game plans and an uncanny ability to not be able to make adjustments or lean into the run when it was working. He is the definition of a coaching grifter, achieving almost no success while tricking organization after organization into giving him employment opportunities. I do wish Pat Shurmur well in Jacksonville next year. Now, the Broncos scored just 20 points per game in 2020, which was 28th in the league. This year, they managed fewer points per game, putting up 19.4, which was good for 23rd in the NFL. This looks even worse when you realize Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams combined for over 1,800 rushing yards, which was 9th best in the league. I think if we learned anything from the finale against the Chiefs, it's how much more fun this offense could be with the mobile QB. And even though Drew Lock looked great running the ball with 2 rushing touchdowns, keep in mind he only completed 50% of his passes. I don't think he's the answer moving forward. Neither is Teddy, although I think Drew has a better shot to be back with the team because he's got 1 year left on his deal and it will be cheap. Teddy probably on his way out. But Pat Shurmur, his biggest curse was how thoroughly he squandered one of the best receiving cores in the league. The Broncos' leader in receiving was Courtland Sutton with just 776 yards. A guy like Sutton should be a perennial 1,000-yard receiver. No receiver had more than 5 touchdowns this season, and Jerry Jeudy probably set the NFL record for running yards while in motion pre-snap while never being targeted after going into motion. And nothing is more fucked up than Jerry Jeudy not having a single receiving touchdown this year under Shurmur's guidance. Not only is he bad at the play calling, he's bad at coaching receivers and scheming for them. Furthermore, Drew Lock regressed when they made the switch from Rich Scangarello to Pat Shurmur after a 4-1 finish in 2019. I think back to that year, and it was probably the best Broncos country has felt since Super Bowl 50. There was so much optimism that we had finally found our next quarterback. And I think moving to Pat Shurmur was a big reason Drew Lock's growth was stunted. Had Denver hired an offensive coordinator who was suited to develop a young QB, Fangio would probably still be employed in Denver. Fangio will be the number 1 choice for defensive coordinator this free agency period. Pat Shurmur he'll be an offensive coordinator a team settles for. I am excited to see who the Broncos end up interviewing as they begin the search for their next head coach, which, by the way, will be the team's 7th head coach in the last 15 years. We're not exactly the definition of stability, but this next guy, whoever he is coming in with a blank slate, a talented roster, and a last place schedule. So there's no reason to not be optimistic, right, guys? Right? If you're looking for an offensive-minded head coach, our 2 top choices should be Packers offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett and Cowboys offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. Moore is very young at age 33. But is a hot name and will interview with the Jaguars this week. If Moore is considering Jacksonville, he'd certainly consider Denver, where even no owner is better than Shad Clown. My preference would be Nathaniel Hackett, and that's not even contingent on Aaron Rodgers and my pipe dream of Rodgers coming to Denver being true. I believe Rodgers will actually retire if Green Bay wins the Super Bowl or stay in Green Bay. Nathaniel Hackett, though, has more experience than Moore, but is still young at age 42. He got the Jaguars to the AFC Championship game as an OC with Blake Bortles. Like Moore, he is also interviewing with the Jaguars. If GM George Paton likes one of those gents, he needs to set up interviews with them fast. Now, George Paton is supposedly very high on, this is going to ruffle some feathers, Dan Quinn as the next head coach. Quinn, it's not my first choice, but he could be enticing if Russell Wilson is in play to be the next Broncos QB, since those two were together in Seattle. Quinn helped turn the Cowboys defense around in 1 year. So if you're worried about the defense falling off, he's probably the guy to make sure that doesn't happen. But like Fangio, you become very dependent on the offensive coordinator being amazing to help right this ship. Personally, I think it would be easier to find a defensive coordinator to coach the Broncos' talented defense while zeroing in on an offensive-minded head coach. That said, one thing to keep in mind about Dan Quinn is he's a player's coach. Players genuinely love playing for Quinn. Don't get me wrong, they liked playing for Fangio, but I think Quinn is more in tune with the personal touch a head coach needs in today's NFL to relate to players. Nathaniel Hackett with Russell Wilson is our best case scenario, probably. Hackett with a young QB. The Broncos draft is also promising. Again, we'll have to wait and see who Denver lines up for interviews because I'm just guessing right now. Names to keep an eye on outside of what I just mentioned are Byron Leftwich, who is Tampa Bay's offensive coordinator, Todd Bowles, Tampa Bay's defensive coordinator, Brian Daboll, the Bills OC, Doug Peterson's gonna be a name you probably hear. And as long as it's not Mike Zimmer, who's expected to be fired by the Vikings Monday, I'll be okay. And I did not say Jim Harbaugh because until he decides he's done at Michigan, he's not a real option. But I do like Harbaugh as well. Until then, I can finally say the era of Shurmuring in Denver is over. No longer will our offense be practicing incompletions.
We did a drill today where we were actually trying to throw incompletions.
The next QB in Denver is just as important as the next head coach. The Seahawks have said they are not trading Russell Wilson, but unless they fire Pete Carroll, I think Russ will force his way out. There may be resolution in the Deshaun Watson case in a couple weeks. So, either this will be a wild offseason, or like last year, just a bunch of speculation and the only major QB change to teams is Deshaun Watson, who comes with enough baggage to close down DIA for a month. At this point, I just hope that I'm not looking back at the Shurmuring era fondly in 2 to 3 years like we started to do with Vance Joseph. May I always hate Shurmur's play calling. Good luck, Broncos. We fucking need it. Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here on YouTube. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, @BrandonPerna. And who would you like to see as the next Denver Broncos head coach? Please tell me.